Hello, and this is quite the place. Thank you very much. So, do the next right thing. The prologue. The prologue. What is the next right thing to do in this room? Well, obviously, fill it with lovely people who go sort of like, oh yes, we're really interested in UX and design and engineering, the connections. But also, we have this nagging feeling that, what's next? What's larger than this? What comes after it? Where are we going? So I thought, rather than just do the next right thing, we'd do the next right thing, the everything, everywhere, all at once supercut. Yeah, I did this in Freiburg as well. It's a cheap trick, but it's lovely and it gets laughs. So I'm going to give you three things today. First thing is going to be a tool for you to use today, this afternoon, tomorrow when you go back to work, whatever you want. The second will be a mode for tomorrow. So as designers, UXers, engineers, researchers, thinking about, okay, where am I going with this? Where are we going with this? And then beyond that, hopefully, a purpose for a lifetime. LFG. So hello, my name's John, I run Smithery. Smithery is a strategic design practice, by which I mean strategic design bridges disciplines and departments, roles and responsibilities. It is concerned with all of the factors around a thing and not just the thing itself. And we do this for lots of different clients, as fitly mentioned. So UNDP, we've been building a future trends and signal system for them. Wellcome Trust, we've been helping with their community engagement in climate and health. I also, with my friend Tobin Shadland, run an innovation and future thinking summer school in Barcelona, which is basically a futures course on the streets. Like Barcelona just screams new things at you. So beginning to think about what happens to water, transport, food in 5, 10 years' time is kind of like the things we do whilst hanging out in Barcelona for the summer, which is not a bad gig. So I've been doing this, whatever this is, as I say to my mum, for now I've worked out longer than all of the time that all my other proper grown-up jobs have gone together. So, which is definitely a sign of something, but I'm not really sure what yet. But the idea of Smithery is it's this idea from the start of making things people want rather than making people want things. Making things people want rather than making people want things. By things, what do we mean by things? Do we mean like objects and chairs? And you go, no, it's not really that kind of design. And then you say, oh, then like digital things, like thinking about those things on the internet or whatever. And you go, well, yes, kind of, but not wholly those things as well. So it really gets you into this place of going, okay, so what are things? When we say the word things, what do we mean? I lean into the Bruno Latour encapsulation of things, of French philosopher. So in the mid-noughties was talking about thing, etymologically comes from the old German. And thing means basically gathering. Basically, it's all of this. We use the word thing not because we're being imprecise, but because we're being precise about how many different pieces to the entanglement there are. He goes on to say in A Cautious Prometheus, artifacts are becoming conceivable as a complex assembly of contradictory issues. Which, makes the slogan, making complex assemblies of contradictory issues people want, greater than making people want complex assemblies of contradictory issues, slightly less snappy. So really I've been thinking, okay, how do I start describing this in a newer and better way for people to understand what is the work here? Show the thing, change the thing. Change the thing, show the thing, show the thing, change the thing. Just this cycle of going, we will look together at what things really are so that we can spot where to change them. And it starts the whole practice with this, an invitation to see the world differently. For decades, we've been told to be afraid of drowning in data. So if you think about this from 1996, there is a tsunami of data that is crashing onto the beaches of the civilized world. I hope nobody gets seasick, by the way, because this screen is quite big. But this, information architects, save us. This idea of sort of like data is huge and there's too much of it and it's scary and, you need professionals to help you with this. I'm really interested in metaphor. So when people say things like that, you go, what does this information as liquid metaphor really imply? Because we use it all the time. Data is the new oil. Information is stored in the cloud, brainstorms, data lakes, and so on. The metaphor assumes that all information is the same, because all molecules of water are the same and all drops of oil are the same, which makes us, the holders of the metaphor, primarily concerned with the storage and the channeling and the containing and the prevention of leaks and things like that. But categorically, information is not all the same. It is different. It is the difference that makes a difference. That's the point of having the information. All of these different pieces are different in their construction, in their source. So it's less important where the information is and is channeled from and so on, compared to what it does. It creates light bulb moments. It prompts flashes of inspiration. It makes us long for new perspectives. And it helps us see the big picture. And even just leaning into those 4 little pieces of language, we start thinking about a different metaphor, which we see that we use all the time. That's my mum. Mom, so embarrassing. Information is light, not liquid, in these metaphorical uses. So at the point where data is and information is very, very useful for us, we're putting it together as various different pixels and particles on the screen. Or indeed, when we're prevented from seeing it, it becomes opaque and hard to see and in shade. If anything, information is 1,000,000 pixels on a screen and not 1,000,000 drops in a barrel. So that's the kind of at the heart of the practice. That's the way that I've just started thinking about lots of different tools to be able to help clients and teams just begin to deal with information in this way so they can make it most useful for them at the points they need it. So one of those tools is called the oblicroscope. I have one here, I think. So it's just a little window. You point it at things, and it helps you not look at what you're looking at, if that makes sense. To not look at what you're looking at. Because you can use things like Buchanan's 4 orders of design to go, okay, so am I looking at the appearance of this thing? Or am I looking at the materials that it consists of? Or am I looking at the interactions it creates? Or am I looking at the systems that support it? So it begins to peel back the layers of the things that are right there in front of you to go, okay, how do I actually understand what this thing is? You can, I've also put, and you can have, all these slides will come with a QR code at the end, but there'll be a little money off thing on the kind of like website if anybody wants them. Oh, and I've also got some card ones with me, so if you come to the discussion one afterwards, you can have one of those. All back to this idea of show the thing, change the thing. Show the thing, change the thing. Reveal what this is. So the tool that I'll spend most time, well, half the remaining time talking about is this one, Zenko Mapping. And it starts with 2 friends who don't know each other, both telling me to read a Stuart Brand book. Any Stuart Brand fans in the audience? None. I see. Nobody in Antwerp likes this. Anyway, so reading Clock of the Long Now and How Buildings Learn Together, I noticed that Brand uses these 2 pace layers models in both books. Now, the friends didn't know each other. The books were written years apart, but it's one of these lazy things that I love seeing, like sort of like, oh, you've just used the same thing in one book as you've used in the other book. And so How Buildings Learn is all about how the site remains static, while the structure moves slowly, all the way down to the things on tables moving really, really quickly. And then the Clock of the Long Now talks about how culture is long and slow. So when you talk about the culture of a company, it's the work of everyone in that company. When you talk about the culture of a country, it's the work of everyone in that country. So it only changes very slowly over time, all the way up through the layers to fashion, which is really fast, small pockets of people doing something. So having read the book at the same time, I started thinking, these 2 things go together, the social and the material, but we never really separate them in our thinking. So I started, as designers do, animating things in Keynote. Thinking about the slow to the fast cultural layers and then weaving them with the fast to the slow material layers. And once I do that sort of thing, because I did economics and econometrics at uni, I'm kind of broken, because I go, oh, there's a model and a framework there. I can turn that into something, very precise. Thanks for the economics laugh. Think of that as the gearbox. And it's essentially built from fast to slow material construction, fast to slow social construction. By social construction, John, you may ask, what do you mean? No. Thank you. Yes! I might make you all sing in a bit. Social construction goes from a conversation between colleagues, understanding in a team, articulation across the business, to what all your users would say. So it can be a very small thing up to everyone's preconceived idea about what something is. And then the material construction goes from a click in a web page to the whole user's basket, to all live baskets on the site, to the whole site, to all the energy use of the site and the storage and the data and everything. You're going to say, what materially is this made of? If you want a simpler example, you could have a family recipe. So the material parts of a family recipe would be the original recipe book, the written on pages, the source of the ingredients, the kitchen equipment. So what makes this recipe happen materially? Whereas socially, it's like, who owned the first book? What were their experiments and the annotations they created? How did they teach it to the family? And how did it get to this status of family legend of sort of like, no, Granny's recipe is this. It's not the one that's in the book, but it's all the social construction around it. It means that I've built this model as a result to think about these things in lots of different ways. So you have material is built from the objects, environments, and systems. The social is built from the conversations, the behaviors, and the interactions. If we purely lived up that axis, we'd argue that the world shapes us. We do everything because of the material world around us, and we have no agency. If we purely lived in this axis, we go, we shape the world, we decide what's important, and anything we ignore does not matter. But really, Zenko Mapping examines the interactions between people in the world around them. Simplest way to deploy it is just to draw 3 boxes for each axis. Up the side, up material, you have a sketch. So just people in a room just going, quick sketch. Then you go, oh, that's interesting, maybe we should do that. So you start building the scaffolding around it, so doing the planning, understanding what sort of resources it would take. And then finally you get to structure. You go, we're now making the thing, we're going to put it out in the world. So that's a typical design process that lives up that axis. Then along the bottom, in the social construction, you have team. So the people, the individual, who are working on something all the time, so they have all the information about the project. They speak to people, users, colleagues, academics, journalists, and they say, okay, so how do we find out more about this? But you can't speak to everyone. You'd love to. We don't have the time, we don't have the resources. So we use quant. Quantitative data is human behavior at scale. So you have this construction here that says, right, I can start here, and essentially in Zenko Mapping I've got 2 choices. Do we know enough in the team to make a better version, to go into the planning stage? Or do we share? Do we actually just take what we have now and go out and ask questions of people and say, what do you think of this? What if we did this? It could be a colleague, it could be a user, just to get some initial reaction to that sketch. Imagine you did that. You then go over here and go, well, I could go there and look for more data on this. So we're beginning to get a sense of what people are doing. Should we go and get early stage data to try and back some of these hypotheses up? Or actually, do we now know enough to refine the sketch and just go backwards? And the process starts to unfold like this. Every time you're going improve, share, back, forward, where do we go next? And the funny thing about it is, the next time the same team could be working in the same problem, the process will look entirely different. Because of their history and moving through the thing, going, oh, we understand some of this, we have more knowledge, we don't have to go there this time. This is problematic in our company, we don't want to go this way because it takes too long. At every one of those stages, you're basically doing this. Do the next right thing. Do the next right thing. Which, I know it sounds like a Frozen quote, but it's not. It's Frozen 2.
And do the next right.
Anyway. So this idea of do the next right thing. From talks you've heard already today, So when Christine was talking about moving from the handoff to the understanding of, thinking about your process as a designer and going, okay, so I'm going above that line into the build, the quality of our work changes at that point, perhaps. So how do we make the most of that bridge, or how do we build boundary objects around that to think differently about encapsulating all of that knowledge that's gone into the thing? Or alternatively, thinking about next thing, yes, get into the environment, understand where that data came from. So don't just be drifting towards the quant and just basing it on the quant. Come back into the qual and think about, okay, where can I be looking for more of this information? How can I understand the context in which it was collected? What's the kind of like the why behind the what? My favorite little use of it might be this. It's like completion is not the success criteria. So getting to the top right is not what is demanded of this design model. It's basically going, I can use this to just do a little project to validate or invalidate something and finish. And I see a successful little journey and go, well, I have saved all the time and effort and money of dancing around those kind of like higher order boxes just by doing some good work and understanding what we know now. When you start stacking them up onto lots of journeys altogether, that becomes really interesting, because you can map the instances of how things work around here. Then you can think about, okay, so given I know all that, what are the issues? Where are the problem spaces that we keep bumping into different things? And then finally, you can go, well, I need some interventions by design or deployment in order to start really understanding where we need to change our process as an organization as a whole. Show the thing, change the thing. Show the thing, change the thing. It's something that I've drawn so many of these just on kind of like tables and just identifying problems that I've given up keeping them because there's now sort of like stacks and stacks of them at home. But every time it's kind of like you're telling the story with someone and working out how this different model helps you think and helps you decide where to act next. It's continuous contextual decision making. Or, do you want to sing? I think we owe this palace a song, don't we? So I'm going to click the button, and that's going to happen again. But we'll go backwards. Oh, fuck it. I think you should all stand up. Everybody stand up. Everybody stand up. Come on. It's been a long, slow, sleepy lunch. Do you want to hear it one more time before we all have to sing it? Do you want to hear it once? Right, we'll go through it once so we understand the beats, and then I'll go back and then we'll do it again. So.
And do the next right thing.
So we're going to go back. 3, 2, 1. And do the next right thing. Give yourself a big round of applause. So, don't invite that Scottish by no. This is the point where people go, oh no, this is good. Now show us some case studies about it. No. The case studies are in the other talk that I did for Smashing earlier in the year, but there's a link to that there, and we'll put that in the end. Instead, because I was thinking about what this room needs, what doing the next right thing means for you and for me and for all of us, I'm going to talk to you about place layers instead, which is done by my friend Dan, again off those Stuart Brand pace layer things. But when I saw that, I thought, oh, maybe these two things go together. Maybe sort of like beginning to think about objects, places, services, systems, and systems of systems is important work moving forwards. Plus, it gives me a chance to do spinning round graphics again, so that's quite nice. So this is called Zenko Systems. So what we have here is the material and the social stuff. Up the middle, you have objects, places, services, systems, and systems of systems. The social is built from the participative So when you're kind of sort of in the quick social stuff, right, you are involved in the process of deciding something. The further up into the system it disappears, it becomes representative. You have a politician or a boss or a shareholder who's making decisions that are out with your control. And then the material side, it's from the operative, so you have your finger on the button, all the way up to the subjugative. Essentially, you're in the system and you can't really control much of the materiality. You just have to do what it says. You have to drive on that side of the road because the whole country is set up to do that. It's then fun beginning to map things onto it. So these are the bins that sit outside my house. What is a bin? Well, a bin is, yes, it's the bin, but also we've all got one, and we all talk about them and use each other's when ours are full, but then the whole street is set up for the lorries to come down and pick them up. The lorries have to go somewhere, so there's all the kind of like council material and so on, but then you have council employees and local councillors, which, you know, paid for by council tax, and you choose them through local elections, and then you go further up and you go political parties, recycling, policies, national waste capacity, and so on. But you begin to start doing this. You draw a system map from an object perspective. So rather than, system mapping can be like big and sprawling and difficult to this, but when you locate it in an object perspective, suddenly you go, oh, these connections are kind of like make up what the wheelie bin is. The further back you look, the more opaque things become, but that's right, because it's really hard to see the local council and the bylaws and so on. You have to do a bit of work, whereas the bin is right there. And in essence, this is what a thing looks like. So when we're talking about a thing, this is a thing. It's a complex assembly of contradictory issues. This is what a thing is. And so therefore our work, our job, is to think about the thing being inseparable from all of that stuff. And our role in this process to engage, to unwind, to infect, to hijack or rewire the system. The more you're able to see a thing, the more you can imagine how it might change. Show the thing, change the thing. And this is a process that we've only been working on this year, but it's been really interesting doing it at the design school, been teaching at the RCA on design futures, and then running it at Barcelona Design Week. Just how quickly people are able to suddenly map out what a thing is and point at a thing and go, oh, I hadn't really seen this connection before. I hadn't seen that we should be operating at this level up here and over here in order to change the thing we thought we were looking at before. The one question that comes around quite a lot once we do these workshops and client things is designers come up and go, this is really interesting. Where are these jobs? Where are these jobs that you sort of like you're allowed to do this as a designer, as a UX person, as an engineer? Where's the job description that says, I want to do strategic design, I want to do this? And Tobin and I were talking about this last week. And it's almost the wrong question. It's not about where the jobs are, it's where the work is. Okay, not where the jobs are, but where the work is. Because imagine you're kind of like, and I feel like we only touch on certain object and slightly in place. Your job is to reveal this to the rest of the organization and go, okay, so now that we can see the thing, maybe we can change the thing. There's no real job description that does that beyond the sort of like, we should do this because, you know, we need to, because this work is coming to everybody's job. This sort of understanding of the connection of the impacts of the challenges that we're about to face are significant, and no one else is doing this. That quote, no one's coming, it's up to us, right? No one's magically going to swoop in and do this work. We feel that we're under capacity when at a time that every design job is a climate job. But I don't want to concentrate on the sort of like the thing you do day to day either, because you are so much more than that. I mean, I've heard your singing voices at least. This work can start at home. So this is our garden. So we moved into a new build house in the UK, and that's what we were given, just a turfed, grassed piece of thing, because that's how houses are built in the UK. They just scrape the entire land and go, right, clear all this, all nature can die, and then we'll put houses down. There was a design project out of Goldsmiths in the RCA called My Nature Watch Camera. And it was really exciting. It was build your own Nature Watch camera with the kids. We did that, very excited, put it outside, neighbours. And we thought, oh, so we moved it around the garden, nothing, neighbours. And then we thought, all right, we've got a bird feeder. We put the bird feeder up, put the camera in front of it. neighbours. I like it. So we realize it's something like, okay, so we have to think more systemically about this. What is it birds need? What is it birds like? How do we learn to make our garden somewhere that is suitable for birds to come? Prompted by this intervention, prompted by this Nature Watch camera. So we started digging out all the grass. We started putting in lots of different sorts of planting so they had places to hide. We made a pond out of a basin. We just put it into the ground. And all of a sudden, you start to get wildlife. And once you get wildlife, then you get birds. Because they're going, oh, actually, there's places for hide. We don't just have to feed on the stuff that you're feeding us because there's other stuff in this living place. But that just felt like doing this, like just thinking about our garden in this place. And we thought, okay, nature doesn't think like that. Birds don't go, oh, you seen around John's house? There's some amazing things, and they've got a camera as well. We should just pop around there. How far is it? It's about half a mile. No, that's too far, Bobby. Why have you brought me on stage, Bobby? I don't know. Who are you? So I did what 46-year-old people do and wrote a blog. Hands up who blogs. 2 more people than like Stuart Brand. But it's a really good way of just sort of like putting things out in the world. And just even if you're just explaining it to yourself and a couple of neighbours. I did weird things, like I bought 50 hedge plants. We didn't need 50 hedge plants, but the offer was too good to be true, and I am Scottish. 50 plants for £50. I mean, seriously. But it meant that we could give them away to neighbours and go, look, we've got these natural species. Do you want some of these? And everyone goes, oh, yeah, well, I hadn't really thought about it, so I will. Suddenly, all of the different sorts of insect and bird life we were seeing goes up. A researcher from BBC's Gardener's World gets in touch. So you should blog more, because the BBC read it, apparently. And said, do you want to do a little viewer's video of this? And I just thought they meant for the website. And I thought, sure, I'll do that. And then, yeah, this July I was on BBC Two talking about rewilding gardens, which is very strange. Of all the telly that I thought I'd ever be on, it wasn't Gardener's World. But then an interesting thing happens. So George, who lives in our estate and is part of our kind of like little fledgling community nature group, he's also the garden contractor. And he said, you know what, I might do something called no mow May. So no mow May is, as it suggests, you don't cut all of the green spaces down in May and just let insect life thrive. So I was like, oh, that's a good idea, George. But we can't just do it. We have to use the world's greatest single piece of technology in order to tell people. The A4 piece of paper. Basically just making little signs and putting them up and going, George is going to talk about no mow May in this place at this time. If you're interested in nature, come along. And so we get a little gathering of people there. There's about 20 people. And one of them is Ray. It turns out Ray lives in the estate. Ray is like one of Britain's foremost spider experts. And the good thing about being a spider expert is you know everything that spiders eat. And you know everything that eats spiders. So suddenly you've got all this knowledge about moths and flies and birds and everything else. And so we did a little walk around the estate, just mapping out all the different things, and then showed it to everyone else. And this is what we have. This is what we might have. Tony, who lives in the estate, is retired. And he was like, well, do you know what? We should start thinking about who else on neighbouring estates. So taking that principle of the garden out to the estate, Tony just starts taking the principle of the estate out to other estates, going, I wonder who else is interested in this throughout the village and the town that we live. Maddie turns around and goes, I've now applied to the Woodland Trust for community trees, and they've given us 105 trees, which, no word of a lie, are arriving next week. So we're having a community walk on Thursday to work out where we put 105 new trees. Anna says, oh, I've set up this community on the Wheel to Waves project, which is a Sussex-wide project, which is also part of the satellite catapults pitch, where they're looking to give funding for people who can connect satellite-level data to communities to make them think more about the natural world around them. So suddenly, you start plotting out from one garden all of the different things, both social and material, that you go, this is what we can do. And it sometimes feels like you go, as a designer, you go, well, I just work on websites, or I just do this thing, or I just, my skills are kind of like very specific and very deployable in this way. We have so many skills in this room, and the design world globally that can be applied to different challenges in different ways to help people, change the thing by seeing the thing. So this is this is our estate. If anything, the UI is what we were given. It's a bad UX joke, isn't it? But really, this is UX. This is let's understand the people who live here and the things that they might want to do to the natural world around them to encourage more nature. We should be treating UX as useful experience for taking it into the things that we need to do in our neighborhood, in our towns, in our cities, in our regions, in our countries, across the world. Show the thing, change the thing. It's not product design. You are the product of design. Okay. All that investment by all industries into this design space over the last 20, 30 years has put into the world some phenomenal talent and powers. So what we want to do is go, how do we deploy those? How do we use them as best we can? And it's not about being design heroes, because design is not a superpower. Okay? It's not sort of like, oh my God, that's marvelous. Break it down into the small, humble acts that you do day in, day out in your job. And just act as those friendly neighborhood designers to go, what else can we do? What can we contribute to that helps all of these challenges that we're beginning to face? So, let's go and change the world. Hey! Now, to help you do this, if you're sitting there going, oh, this doesn't sound like me at all, I'm going to hand over to Jason next. And he's going to help you think about, well, just how do I do that? How do I think about what it is I do and where I can go in work, in life, for the world? As the man says, LFG. Thank you.
Hey, John, would you like to join me for a little conversation? I have so many things here all over, so please join me. I think we'll have to stand up in a moment because there are some people who want to see the Zenko mapping in action.
Oh, yeah, fine.
Right? But maybe before we do that, just getting there, kind of always think about like the things that you show, the connections. And I think that one thing that I kind of noted, that you really need to see what's in front of you in order to be able to change it.
Yes.
Very often, I think, and many of us maybe see here in this room as well, feel like you might be feeling a bit stuck in your company organization that doesn't maybe value or feels like it doesn't value your work or in some way doesn't really help you to really bring UX throughout the entire organization. So if you happen to be in this sort of situation, first you need to understand, I guess, what are the different things that people on different levels care about, and then create this sort of mapping, or how would you proceed there to really introduce a change?
So I guess there's always that thing. I mean, I think back to the last time I was employed by another company in a what might be considered a job. My job was like the in-betweenness, and I almost so I was chief innovation officer, but I made a point of thinking about the in-betweenness. So there's that famous story of the professor who goes into a class with a bell jar, and he fills it up with rocks, and he asks the student, how full is this? And they go, well, you filled it with rocks, it's full. And then he gets pebbles and pours it in, and the pebbles fill all the space. And he says, well, how full is it now? And like, well, it's full now. And then he proceeds to get sand and then water. But companies aren't very good at sort of like creating the sand and the water that fills all the things between the jobs. So it's really about beginning to visualize these things that are undone within the company and just showing it to people and finding who else is interested in beginning to solve that sort of stuff. Asking questions and not settling for the answers of, oh, I think someone in the US's office is working on this. I think it's over there. So some people will deflect it and say, oh, I think this is happening elsewhere. So keep pursuing those answers to the key spaces that you see in the setup.
One question that came up as well, is Zenko mapping similar to service blueprint or journey mapping, or is it an entirely different thing?
It is decidedly less linear because, and I didn't do the section. I've got a whole section that talks about why the double diamond is evil and must die. But that felt like it would bring the mood down. But essentially, it's this relentless left to right linear notion in all design models, which are a lie, because that's not how design works. And it's sort of like the shapes and the sizes of various different models. If you're just forcing people left to right and you just use time as the x-axis, then you're not really giving yourself the freedom to not
go
complete.
back and then
yeah, because it
jump.
feels like failure.
Yeah.
If you, every time you feel like you're moving backwards through a linear design model, it feels like failure. And so this is more about, okay, let's have a model that doesn't feel like failure, and actually we can express various different things in order to understand what good looks like.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There was also a question from Sasha. How would unplanned and in the end hurtful intervention from C-level, we need this new thing now fast, look in the Zenko map, and how is your experience with this acceptance of this realization when shown to C-level?
Oh, okay. So I might draw that.
Sure, go for it.
So, hello. What's really interesting is sort of like, so C-level will sometimes, if they're operating up here at the structural level, and this came up in a client project where there was something that was live already, and the question was, we need this to change right now. So you can use Zenko mapping in reverse and go, okay, so you're telling me this thing that's finished, and you're just here telling me that sort of like this thing must change. Can you? That must change. My writing's terrible today. So you go, right, rather than that becoming an instruction to the team to resketch and go again, you can lead people on a journey and go, okay, we need some qualitative feedback from people who are kind of using this live, or some quant here, which tells us more about the thing live. We can also work out why it was signed off like this. What was the beta test? What was the previous thing? What were the qual stuff before that? So you can almost use it as a kind of, you're retrospectively pulling apart all the decisions that took you to that point in the first place. Then you can go back to this thing. So it gives you a way of taking that top-level C-suite request and turning it into a staged thing that you can get. Or at least I'm going to collect the information with you that you're working from, rather than for me, this is a terrible kind of thing of just like, change this thing, because it can quite often be because I don't like it. And you go, well, just not liking something is maybe not a good enough reason to change it. So how do you walk people through the map to come down to a better kind of like sketching process here?
So maybe also kind of building on top of that, if you think about like double diamond being kind of the inaccurate representation of reality, maybe you could show different design processes just to give sort of a sense of kind of examples of what it usually looks like and how it evolves over time, to also identify patterns and stuff like that.
Yeah, so there's sort of like, there's, so one of kind of like the easiest ones is like a constant to and fro at the sketch level of kind of like getting lots of moments of user feedback and refining designs to a certain extent. And that might have also some early stage data, although what you do find, interestingly, is that this box is sometimes ignored because people don't want to do the quant work until a project's signed off to this level, and then they've got budget to either use internal resource or commission things to start getting quant to feed back into this process. A lot of stuff tends to drift over this line here quite easily because it's just people running around an organization, having ideas, doing little Figma demos and whatever else, and saying, oh, look, I've got an idea, I've tested it with some people, can I go up to this stage? Then what you find in some organizations is this is a massive barrier because that's kind of like where costs incurred. And that's where you're going, we'll get no bandwidth for this, we've got no engineering, we don't have the budget, we don't know what the launch window would be. So you end up with lots of projects which are into the scaffolding phase, butting up against this wall, fighting for the same resource. So in that circumstance, what you want to do is actually make this a bit harder to get over. And that might be something that you can sort of like bring early stage data into. If you say, if you give me 15 grand for data validation early, I will save you the 50 grand or 100 grand that's going to cost us up here, just by knowing whether this thing is viable earlier than we would normally.
Yeah. I think in general it's kind of interesting to see patterns. I think that once you start doing that, this is kind of because, I heard about this maybe 3 months ago
Yeah.
from you, like from a video that you recorded. And then I thought, can we apply this? Can we do this? And at first, it maybe to some of you, it feels like, oh, interesting. But then the thing is, if you actually have a project and you try it maybe once and it feels a little bit, okay, this is how we worked in this project. And then for the next project, you kind of say, like, in a retrospective, right? This is how we worked in this project. Oh, this is how we worked in this project. Start identifying these patterns that emerge once you map it, like very much like you showed, when you map it against each other, and say, oh, this is a bottleneck here. We always struggle in this part. Again, this is kind of this point of you need to visualize what you have in front of you in order then to change it, right?
Yeah.
There is a question that also came up. Maybe you want to show it or maybe just answer. Jackie is wondering how to implement Zenko mapping in ambiguous environments with unclear expectations. How do you know if it's the right thing that has been done if you get fluffy business requirements and so on?
So funnily enough, let me draw on the back of one of these. It's shone through. Okay. Does anybody know Eddie Obeng's project mapping? Maybe? Okay, I'm going to draw Eddie's thing. I'll have to try and get it right. Ba-ba-da. So, let me think. Know what? Don't know what? Know how? Don't know how. So, this is project mapping, Eddie Obeng. If you know what and you know how, it's paint by numbers. Okay, so it's an easy project because you know exactly what you're trying to do and you know how. So it's easy to fill in. If you know how, but you don't know what, it's a movie studio. So you go, I don't know what my movie's going to be yet, but I know it's definitely going to be a movie, so I'm just going to send things through it. If you know what, but you don't know how, oh, I forgot what that one is. I'll come back to that. But this, like, don't know what and don't know how. So this was kind of like foggy project. And so Colin at the BBC asked, when he saw the Zenko mapping things, like, we map lots of our projects using Eddie Obeng's thing all the time, and tons of them end up as foggy. Okay, and that's actually no use, because if everything's one quadrant, you're going, well, that doesn't tell us anything that we can use. So really, they wanted to use, and that was kind of like, so you see when the thing went, you start mapping lots of projects on top of each other, and then you start doing the interventions. And then
as interventions, you mean kind of changing the way of working?
Changing process, changing way of working, and so on.
Yeah.
So you begin to learn how the organization works like that. So it gave them a way of teasing apart, okay, so when we mean foggy projects, maybe we can start categorizing them in different ways and finding new muscles and new ways of sort of like going about a project that takes us out of this not knowing how to start. If you are, to bring it back to the kind of like the core of the question as I'm thinking about it, if it's really something new and you've got no idea, and there's a couple of you sitting down here doing sketches, my preference always, as I kind of like an old school market researcher originally, is go this way. Just keep discovering. Oh, maybe I'll do the metaphor. So we did a metaphorical project mapping with, and my friend, who did it? Me, Ella, Simon, Fraser. If you go too far this way, if you keep gathering things, you get lost in the forest of constant chatter. Right? You're just wandering through trees. So yes, go and discover things, but realize at the point at which you sort of like go, everywhere I turn, I can find so many opinions, so many bits of data that I'm lost and I don't know what to do. You have to make something at some stage, even just as a prototype to kind of like consolidate your own learning. But equally, and one of the stories Ella told was that spending too long doing that on your own makes this a mountain range. It's easy to cross down here. Up there, it's like fucking Mordor.
You have impeccable drawing skills, John.
Run, you fools. If you just save all your kind of, I'm not going to show it to anyone until it's perfect. It's so horrible to cross at that high point where you think you're almost finished. the feedback you get will be crushing and you'll never do anything again. Always cross at the low foothills and so on, and just sort of like think about where you're discovering things. But I think the sort of like using it as a map like that, if you can start drawing objects, boundaries, things where you go, oh, that's interesting, we've discovered something here. You can push into the metaphor as much as you like with a team. And actually that really works well, because if there's 5, 6, 10 of you in a team who've got the same metaphors, you can then start explaining sometimes quite complex concepts in a simple language that you go, oh, I think we're lost in the forest. We need to cross the mountains a bit sooner than that. What's the thing that we are able to do? And it's a way of building learning as you go. There's a great book by Peter Turchi about maps, where he points out that maps are for two things. Maps are for exploring and presenting. So they're not just for showing you what exists, but they're showing you, you know, here be dragons. You go, we haven't been there, but we should go there, but we have to find out all the things on the way that will help us get there or prevent us doing so.
Right. Well, if you have more questions on Zenko mapping or anything else, really, or mountains, or dragons,
or Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, or anything. You can also find John as well next to the Smashing membership stand, where we also sell books and stuff, by the way, during the break, the next break. But we're going to move to the next talk for now. John, thank you so much for being with us. A round of applause to John.